Welcome to Rubberband Live, the Australian recruitment and talent acquisition vodcast and podcast. I am Eden Haddock, your host and the creator of Rubberband, the recruitment network for all. Let's go live. And we are live. I am so sorry for the delay. I had a bit of a technical issue, but we are live. Thank you everyone for your patience. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work on, the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome everyone out there for this edition of Rubberband Live, Talent and Recruitment, What Do CEOs Really Want? I am so excited to be joined by three CEOs today, Anthony Seymour-Walsh, Sarah Lyons, and Mark Gates. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Fabulous. No, it's an absolute pleasure. So let's get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to start by, I guess, a quick intro. Tell us a little bit about your career, a bit of a summary of who you are. We'll start off with Anthony. Keen to hear all about you, Anthony. Not that I haven't met you before.
You have met me before, yeah. We work together very closely. So I am currently CEO of CashRewards, which is Australia's largest cashback business. It's the place you come to get cashback when you shop online and in store. I've been enrolled for 4 months. Prior to that, I was with Eden at Flybuys, Australia's favourite loyalty program, in a chief commercial officer role, looking after our partnerships and our data and analytics team. And prior to that, I've done a variety of finance roles. I'm a chartered accountant by trade, but wanted to step out of the numbers and into influencing business more holistically. So yeah, a really varied background, but it's really great to be with you all today.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So thank you so much for joining. Sarah Lyons, tell us a little bit about yourself, a quick summary of who you are and a little bit about your career.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Eden, for inviting me on. I'm the Chief Exec of Gallagher Insurance Brokers and will have been Chief Exec for nearly 6 years, having arrived in Australia about 10 years ago. I've been in the insurance industry for probably more years than I care to mention, 30 plus. But I now have the great privilege of being able to look after a business that's got 36 locations across Australia, and I get to visit them all, which is tremendous.
Oh, how wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thanks for joining us today. And Mark Gates, tell us a little bit about yourself, a quick summary of who you are and a bit about your career.
Thank you, Eden, and nice to see everyone. Actually, interestingly, my role and Anthony sort of very similar, come from that corporate finance background. So again, a chartered accountant by trade, went to step into more operational roles, so worked on a number of large and small businesses in the corporate finance, operational and corporate strategy roles. Stepped out of those roles for possibly one of the most challenging roles of my life when I took a year out to be a stay-at-home father, and without doubt the hardest role of my life. And ultimately set up my own consultancy business, which is how I found my way into my current role, which is CEO of Vanguard Laundry. So Vanguard is one of the largest not-for-profit businesses in the country, and we're helping change people's lives. So it's a good opportunity to give something back and also, challenge myself in a slightly wider role.
Wonderful. We've got such a great variety here, I suppose, in terms of industry, and it's really great that our audience that are working in different sectors are able to, hear from the three of you, Sarah, yourself in Fin Services, Mark, not-for-profit, and Anthony in consumer tech. So we've got a really great variety here. Now, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, I'm hoping everyone is able to have connected through to the event today. We had a little bit of a technical issue at the start. Please pop your comments and questions in. But I've got a question for all three of you, and I'm going to go around the room because I love this question, and I think it's always fascinating, particularly for those who are starting out their careers that are aspiring to become a CEO. Tell me about your first job. Anthony, what was your first job?
My first job was working for Bilo, which is a now defunct supermarket. They were purchased by the Coles Supermarkets Group. And for me, I had a variety of roles. I ended up as a duty manager. I worked on checkout. I used to look after fresh produce, dairy, and even replenishing grocery. And for me, it taught me 3 key skills. One is customer service and the importance of really connecting with your customer. The second was standards. Having good standards in that environment is critical. And the third was business systems and processes, and the importance of that underpinning everything that you do to have that consistency.
Wonderful. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. How about yourself, Sarah? What was your first job?
All right, so my first paid job whilst I was at school, I was a chambermaid. And I can honestly say I really do not like cleaning bathrooms as a result of that. But my proper first job in the workforce, I worked in a bank.
Oh, wow.
So initially starting in the back office and then made my way to be a cashier.
Fantastic. Wow. And Mark, how about yourself?
Yeah, so like many others, I had sort of few Sunday and summer jobs, sort of standard retail jobs. My first professional job, for want of a better word, was actually working for Lloyd's of London in London for an insurance company. So I was actually a claims assessor, weirdly enough. Didn't go to university like most people at my level, and decided to go out there and join the big bad world. And so I was working in the insurance field, and it gave me a very good early appreciation for the working life, particularly for one main reason. I was dealing with brokers who, as I'm sure Sarah will know, are a certain type of breed of individual for all of their ups and downs, but also working with insurance underwriters. So at that point in time, insurance underwriters were quite a sort of stuffy bunch of individuals and quite gruff in the way that they sort of manage their day to day. So I had these two groups of individuals that I had to liaise with. So it taught me very early on how to sort of communicate effectively at those two levels.
Wonderful. Love it. Now, everyone out there that is trying to view on LinkedIn, it's actually not streaming on LinkedIn. So just jump onto the YouTube channel. Their message is in the box. Now let's talk recruitment. But I want to talk about when you've been a candidate, when you've interacted with a recruiter or a talent acquisition professional. I want to hear about an experience, whether it's positive or negative, where you were the candidate and what made it so memorable. So I'll start with you, Anthony. Tell me about a candidate experience from your career.
Yeah, great. Look, I'll talk about the experience to land my existing role. I was approached by a recruiter, and right from very early in the process, it was clear that it was going to be a really engaging process. And I think the highlight for me, the reason I'm calling that out as a really positive experience, is I got to meet with a really wide variety of people, as you'd probably expect when you're coming into a CEO role. But the most important component for me that I think is more broadly applicable is I got to meet with a couple of the people that I would be working with if I was successful in the role. So I met with our CFO and our Chief People Officer during the recruitment process. And it gave me a brilliant opportunity to really understand what the culture of the business was going to be like before I joined. And that interview was both a bit of a grilling up front, but it turned into a really positive experience where by the end, those two individuals were really advocating for me through the process. And so, you know, that notwithstanding, it was just brilliant as part of the overarching recruitment process to meet a couple of people from the team. And I'll also give you a negative. It's a really quick and simple one. When you apply for a role and just never hear anything back, it's a horrible experience. And I'm sure that no candidate ever enjoys that, irrespective of what role they're applying for.
And it happens way too often. It's very, very interesting. Thankfully, my community, the Rubberband community, we're very passionate about candidate experience, but we've all been in that situation, and it does stick with you. And I think it really, when you don't hear from an organization or you receive a negative candidate experience, it really impacts that brand. If you're a consumer or whatever it might be, it really does. It tarnishes it. So yeah, completely agree with that. How about yourself, Sarah? Talk us through an experience, positive or negative, where you were the candidate and what made it so memorable.
So the experience I'm just going to talk about is about me coming to Australia. So I was originally contacted, been asked a question, haven't you always wanted to work in Australia? Well, my answer was no. I'd never been to Australia, never been out this way. I was quite happy working in the UK. But I know that the insurance industry is a very small industry, and some of the people in Australia and the business that I was being courted for, I knew people in the UK. So I said, yes, I would meet the head of recruitment, who just so happened to be coming across to the UK. That 30-minute conversation or 30-minute coffee turned into a few hours of conversation. And the reason that it made it a difference for me is the particular individual spoke so highly about not just the company, but about the role, and could pick up on the things that I was talking about and translated that into how it would be a challenge and how it would be something really exciting for me. It wasn't about the location, because I hadn't been to Australia. It was about the job, and it was about the challenge that it would provide. And the individual was so passionate about that and about the company he worked for that I was going, I've bought into this. And the only reason I actually carried on the conversation was because of that initial coffee chat. I then met a number of different people, both of which both you and Mark know. And if it had not been for those two individuals, I would never have come to Australia, and I would never have had the opportunity to be a chief exec. So right back to that experience is I owe an awful lot.
Oh, that's such an amazing story. And I think it's really valuable advice for people out there. I mean, you know, we do get approached by recruiters, whether you're a recruiter yourself or whether you're in any industry. And I always say, have the coffee. It's half an hour of your time, and you never know where it's going to lead you to. So I'm so glad that you had that coffee, and I'm so glad that you came to Australia. So what an incredible story. Yeah, wonderful. How about yourself? Thank you. How about yourself, Mark? An experience, positive or negative, where you were the candidate, and what made it really stand out? What made it memorable?
It's interesting. It's such a combination of Anthony and Sarah's stories. So again, my first role moving to Australia, I've been contacted by a recruitment agency who approached me for it was a general manager of finance role, a large corporate based here in Melbourne. And the recruiter I met with and had a coffee, and he said, look, there's a role going I think you're going to be excellent for. I think you're going to be really enjoy what the company has to offer, et cetera, et cetera. But he said the only issue is the hiring manager internally is well renowned as being a bit gruff and a bit old school. And he said, you know, you need to embrace that. He said, but if you get on board with this person, I truly believe this is going to be an amazing opportunity. And so we went and met with the hiring manager who had been in the role for 40 years when I'd met him. So very, very much old school manufacturing industry. Within 2 minutes of the interview, the hiring manager said to me, do you like wearing ties? And I said, personally, no. And he said, good, take yours off, leave the room, come back in and we can talk. And so it's exactly what we all did. We went outside, we took our ties off, and we came in. And the only reason I was able to sort of say no at that point in time was the recruitment agency said to me, you've got to stand firm on your decision. You've got to have a view with this person. You've got to be strong. Doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree. And it was that one piece of advice. And so had I walked into the room not having had that advice, I wouldn't know what to have done. But basically, he asked me a question and said, stand by it. And so as it turned out, I got the job. Within an hour, we were out celebrating over lunch. And 7 years later, I was still there. So there's that buy-in from that recruitment agency who knew exactly this was the right place for me and it was the right person for that organization. But it was that last piece of advice to get through the door, basically. So I'll be forever in debt to that person.
Oh, that's wonderful. What a great story. And, you know, there are so many amazing recruitment professionals out there that really do go into that detail and get you really well prepared for those interviews. I think, you know, unfortunately, recruitment agencies had a bit of a reputation, you know, like used car salesmen at one stage. But I think, you know, when you're finding the right people with a really strong values alignment that partners closely with you, it's amazing. I think that's a really great example of that. So let's talk about what talent acquisition and recruitment really is. I mean, we as an industry, we always talk about how we want a seat at the table, but I think sometimes we don't actually listen to our CEOs. And, you know, we make a lot of assumptions. So I would love to know, as a CEO, what does talent acquisition and recruitment really mean to you? What do we do? What's it all about? Anthony, tell me from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's an underrated business partnering function. It's, leveraging Mark's story, the ability to intimately understand what's happening in the organization, who the key people are, what the culture looks like, and then representing that to potential candidates from the perspective of creating an employee value proposition. I think TA in particular becomes the face of your employer brand. And I know, Eden, you know, you did a fantastic job of creating an employer brand when we worked together at Flybys and became famous to the point where that was influential in bringing really great talent to that business. And I think the TA function is an underrated capability to build that employer value proposition and to really act as the conduit between the best talent in market and the reality of the role, whether, you know, again, leveraging Mark's experience, where there are some elements of the role that perhaps could be swept under the carpet and it's a bit of a surprise on day one or beyond. You know, having that holistic conversation through the journey is really valuable, so that every candidate coming in knows what they're getting themselves in for, both in terms of the positives and some of the things that need to be improved from an opportunities perspective. So I think an absolutely critical business partnering function.
Wonderful. So wonderful to hear. I hope the audience out there is listening to that. Have a chat to your CEO. They do value what you do. Well, I hope they all do. How about yourself, Sarah? What does talent acquisition and recruitment mean to you?
Yeah, I definitely echo those comments. I do think both TA and recruitment hold a massive significance in the success of an organisation. I always ask all leaders in our business to have a people pipeline. But the reality is, unless they focus on it, it falls by the wayside. And when it comes to then, looking to replace a vacancy, people end up scrabbling around. Whereas if you actually do within your organisation, or even you use an external company, focus on that, I think both TA and recruitment can help you acquire top talent. So they can identify those with the right skills, the expertise, innovative thinking to help you plug a gap within your own organisation. It can help you build high-performing teams. If you understand where you've got gaps in your organisation, then you get the diverse thinking by bringing different individuals into your organisation. You can help get that right individual who can make a significant difference. And I think if they really understand your business, it does help create that performance culture in your organisation, that positive company culture, because if you work closely with somebody who really understands your goals, your strategy, your values, then they can actually seriously help you get that right individuals, can help you grow and be successful. And then once you've got them in, if they found the right individuals and you can actually build on that capability, you can then retain top talent as well. So
Absolutely.
A huge part.
Agreed. I think there is so much more to it than just hiring or finding people or filling roles. It's really deep strategic talent management that has such an impact on an organization. So I love that perspective. Thanks so much, Sarah. How about yourself, Mark? What does talent acquisition and recruitment mean to you?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, this, for me. I mean, for me, it comes down to one simple word. It's an opportunity. So I think some of the best talent acquisition people I've worked with have both sold the company to candidates as well as selling the candidate to the organisation, right? So it comes back to Anthony's point about being that conduit between the two, because I think that's so important. But the other one for me is the nuances of candidates, that where the recruitment agency, internal or external, can come to you with a candidate and say, look, they can fill this role and they can demonstrate this role. However, they can also help you achieve A, B, and C because of their background or because of their way of thinking or whatever it might be. And so to Sarah's point, it's how can they help me, fulfill my strategic plan outside of just a pure, simple fact, it's the person for the role. It's what else do they bring to the role as an individual? Because 9 times out of 10, and you guys would know more than most, there are so many candidates for one role. So what else can they do? What else can they bring to the organisation? So for me, it's that recruitment agent is knowing that person, having that relationship to the point where they can then sell that candidate to me as much as the other way around.
100%. I've had a really interesting question come up, so I'm just going to bring that up. And thank you so much for this question, Alicia. I think it's a really great one for a lot of people in the talent acquisition and recruitment industry. So how would your TA team or recruitment partner get FaceTime with you if they don't have that opportunity currently? So you're very busy. You have busy schedules. So how would a recruitment team or a recruiter, talent acquisition professional start that conversation with you? How do you want us to approach you? Anthony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I'm going to talk about a specific challenge in our industry as an example of how to get, great FaceTime. So we work heavily in the technology space, and from an innovation perspective, we are constantly looking for the best technology talent, and specifically in the space of mobile app development, which I'm sure there's a bunch on the call that are finding it very difficult to recruit and retain mobile app developers. And for me personally, I don't quite understand the challenge. So a great way of engaging with me would be to bring that problem to us as an exec leadership group and as a CEO, but bring it from the perspective of what you're seeing out in market. What insights do you have, and what potential solutions could there be to solving that problem? And maybe you need my support on something. Maybe it's about having me support with the creation of an employee value proposition that resonates with that group of individuals based on what you know about them, and partnering to jointly solve that common business problem. So if I see a request come through that's around identifying a really key business need and then potential solutions to that business need, I'll always make time.
Yeah. Agreed. I think, in my experiences working with yourself and working with the CEO that we had at Flybuys, being able to present that this is the problem that I'm facing and here are some ideas that I've got. Could we go over that together? And it was always the experience I had with the leadership team at Flybuys that you were open to it. So, Sarah, what about yourself? If your team were facing a particular challenge and wanted to get some face time with you, how would they approach that? How should they reach out to you?
A similar sort of thing. I think we're all facing the war for talent, aren't we? Attracting and retaining talent. So this is the prime time for TAs to get in front of their chief exec. Now, it may be that I know one traditional way of recruiting, but they might open my eyes to many other different ways. And they've got to be able to say that I just need to be able to spend a bit of time to explain well, the best way we're actually being able to hire people, or the best way for us to be able to take talent. It's not just the traditional way it used to be, but then they come up with a number of different scenarios. And I'd be definitely open to hear that, because I'm learning something myself. It helps fix a problem that we've all got. And we all want to be that one that can actually crack it more so than our competitors. So this is the time when you'll find it easy to get in front of your chief exec.
Great advice. Agreed. Anything you'd like to add, Mark?
Yeah, for me, so we deal mainly with external recruitment as opposed to internal. But for me, it's about being proactive rather than reactive. So one of the worst things I know in my own experience is I will often reach out to people in the talent acquisition space when I need to do something, which is absolutely the wrong time to do it. But again, if you start to forge those relationships with CEOs about knowing what's coming up, like what's in the calendar for the next 3 months, particularly when there's major events, there's strategic planning coming up or whatever it might be, things that the TA teams can start to make an impact to, and knowing it's coming up, I think that's often the best time to sort of get involved in that process, as opposed to sort of wait for that conversation to come back your direction, basically. So I think the more ahead you can get in it will certainly help. And selfishly, from my point of view, I would much rather plan for a problem that's going to happen or a resolution in 3 months' time than something in 3 days' time. So that's a personal view from me.
Agreed. And look, it's a really great segue, Mark, into the next question. And thanks, Anthony and Sarah, too. Because as a talent acquisition industry or recruitment industry, we really do focus a lot on metrics. So we report on everything. We've got so many data points that come through. But what data would you gain the most insights from? So what should we be sending you? What should we be providing you? And like to keep you informed of what's going on. What would you like to receive from your recruiters and talent teams? Anthony, let's start with yourself.
Yeah, look, I probably struggled a bit with this question, to be honest. And for me, it's a lot of internal metrics. I'd probably prefer to see more about what's happening out in market and any reliable stats that you've got about what's happening in that market. I spoke previously about the challenge we've got in our business in hiring mobile app developers. I would love some market stats about what that means, what that looks like. Where are they? What's the path to bringing them in, and what do we need to do differently? I think some of those stats, some insights around what that could look like and what we could do as a business to support an easier journey for those more critical roles. And I think just generally the ability to benchmark what you're seeing in your own organisation once candidates do come in and become great talent in your organisation. So the other thing that I thought about was our employee engagement surveys and employee pulse checks. How are we performing relative to what's out in market? And one of the things that I always look at is what was the expectation of a team member versus the reality once they landed in role? How closely were those two things matched? And if there are any stats that are available publicly in the market in terms of how well you do, I think that would be an interesting benchmark for me to be looking at.
I love that, Anthony. I think there's so much more power in, not just providing, hey, these are how many roles we've filled, but actually looking at what a successful hire looks like. And that can be all things like performance and engagement. So actually providing data from the roles that you filled 6 months ago to be able to show, okay, this is how that candidate is working out. And this is, their experience. This is versus the reality. I think that's absolutely spot on. How about yourself, Sarah? What kind of metrics and reporting, what kind of data would you get the most insights from? How should we be keeping you informed?
Well, look, I agree that every industry needs information about their own industry, and I'm not quite sure we've got that to the level that we all need it. And what you find is external recruiters or TAs have probably got that information, but just not captured in a way that makes it easy to be able to send on to chief execs. But assuming we have that, the other things I'd be keen to know about is time to fill. How long does it take to actually get somebody in your organisation? Is it taking too long? Does that mean there's something about the brand? Is it something about the role? Is there a different way that we could articulate it? Going back to my sourcing channel, which one's the most popular now? Do you get different results through different channels? Personally, I don't know. So I'd be keen to be able to know that. And like Anthony, I'd really like to know a candidate's experience. It might be as they go through the process, but when they've actually come on board and be part of our organisation, is there things that we could have done differently? Is the reality different from what they were sold? Does the people who are the first one they come into contact with in our organisation, are they selling the job, selling the brand, selling the company, as well as it was sold to me? That's the thing I would like to know, and because I think it helps in terms of your turnover rates. If you get the right people come in, they're going to stay for a bit longer. So I'm keen to know that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. 100% agree. And I think, that's it's always been, part of what I try to share with my exec leader teams when I've been in roles, because I think you want to know if it is taking too long.
Yep.
The exec leaders are the ones that can empower you, whether it's from a budgeting perspective or an experience perspective, or educating hiring managers on how to provide an effective candidate experience and the impact that can have. So 100%, I agree with all of that, Sarah. I think that's really, really great advice for the audience. How about yourself, Mark, in terms of metrics and reporting and data, and what gives you the best insights? What should we be sending you to keep you informed?
So for me, it's, we're in a sort of a smaller organisation. So within the NFP world, it's quite a small world. But the data I'm always looking for is, what's happening in my sector specifically. So it's come back to what Anthony and Sarah said. I want to know what my other organisations that are very similar to me, who they're looking for, what they're looking for, and why. Because I think, in a space where certain candidates and certain skill sets, and I use the NFP as a good example, is so niche, if we're all looking for very similar roles at a very similar time, well, that's just going to make life very, very difficult. So again, it's knowing what other organizations similar to mine are doing, how are they succeeding, how are they achieving it. So I think it's more sector-led or industry-specific information as opposed to the more generic data sets would be much more useful for me personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that it's really important to benchmark your data against the industry data, because, if I can imagine if you're receiving a time to fill stat, it's going to be very different to Sarah. It's going to be very different to Anthony. So you want to have that context behind it and what it means, And it's not just industry, it's breaking it down. Anthony gave a really good example of, mobile devs, and that's been a challenge for people for the last 3 years. So you don't want to then be benchmarking yourself against hiring call center people, because it's a completely different sector and a completely different story that you're trying to tell to attract people in. So I think that's wonderful. Tell me, just more generally, talent acquisition teams, external recruitment partners, what are you looking for? What's the value they can bring? What do you expect from them? Tell me, Anthony, what do you feel?
First of all, apologies that my camera seems to have gone a bit left of center. This is on brand for us. CashRewards primary color is a purple hue, so I'm right on brands. Look, I think that the key word there is partnering, and for me, partnering to deeply understand what happens in the organisation and what's happening in market, and being a conduit between those two is the most important thing. have probably done a bit of a 180 when it comes to talent acquisition as a result of yourself, Eden, and the great experience that I had at Flybuys. I think prior organisations hadn't operated talent acquisition as effectively as I had seen you do it, and I had probably had a skew towards external recruitment. And the challenge with that was always they are engaged for such a short period of time, and they do a job for you, and it's a bit hit and miss as to how effective that is, but they seem to be able to tap into broader parts of the market. Yeah. So coming back to what a good TA, a great TA resource internally does for you is really partner with you to deeply understand what needs are most pressing in the organisation, and then really partner with you to find the best candidate out in market. And I've just found that's a much more effective way of going about it from an internal perspective, because TA being a persistent capability internally builds up that knowledge of strategy and business culture. For me, it's a much more effective way of going about things. So I would really bring it back to partnering with your key business leaders.
Love it. Wonderful. Great advice. How about yourself, Sarah? What are your expectations of your talent team and external recruitment partners more broadly?
Yeah, very similar to Anthony here in terms of internally. I think they've got to really understand your business. They've got to really understand your culture. They've got to really understand your goals. And they've got to be able to articulate that in a way that makes sense to the people that they're actually wanting to bring on board in your organisation. And absolutely, wholeheartedly, it's about teamwork and collaboration. So they do have to work closely with the hiring manager. They've got to be able to understand what that role is, even if they don't really be able to understand the technicalities of the role. They've got to be able to articulate it in a way so they find the right people for that hiring manager. And for me, they've also got to play a part about onboarding somebody when they come into the organisation. It's not, I've done the work, I've recruited them, and then I never talk to them again. It's somebody else's job. There's got to be that smooth transition across to make sure that the candidate doesn't feel left in any way. You've got to take this all the way through. For external recruitment firms, it's all about building that talent pipeline and networks. They've got access to a lot of people. They need to be able to understand the business that they're working with to make sure that the candidates they're putting in front of them are the ones that would be a good cultural fit. So again, for whether it's internal or external, there is that teamwork collaboration piece. It's about that understanding and that being able to articulate back to the organisation and also the candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And there's such a strong theme of partnership coming out, whether you're external or internal, really partnering with the business to get that depth of understanding from whether it's from a culture perspective, whether it's from the impact that position will have when you hire the right person, values, all of that's coming out. So that's awesome. How about yourself, Mark? What do you expect? You mentioned that you do partner with a lot of external recruitment agencies, and there was a question there if someone was asking around expectations of a recruitment agency. So, yeah, what are you looking for? What's important to you?
So, to build on sort of what Anthony and Sarah said, for me, I have an expectation. This might be too high, but I expect to be challenged. And by which I mean, I often have preconceived notions about the reasons why I want certain roles, and this is what it's going to do, but having that sounding board with someone who works in that space, that no one knows candidates better than the talent acquisition or an external recruiter. So I want them to come back to me and go, look, why are you asking for that? And it might still be the same outcome, but it's that question about why. Don't just assume that you're given this scope of work and therefore go fill it, because unfortunately, a bad recruitment can often end because that hasn't been challenged along the line. So for me, particularly in external recruiters, I want them to challenge both the roles I'm looking for, the places I'm looking, the candidates I'm looking for, all of it. And again, the most important one, and I had it not that long ago, is someone challenged the decision why a candidate was rejected. And so we were able to talk that through and go, well, why did you? Because from their perspective, they were a very good candidate. Once it had been explained, oh, actually, that's a good conversation. Maybe we should think about that. But again, it was that next one question is a really important question. So for me, it's about getting external recruiters to challenge preconceived ideas, basically.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that challenge is really important. And when I reflect of when I've had really strong partnerships in organizations and when my team have been really effective, it does come down to the challenge, because often roles aren't even designed by the talent team. So being able to challenge the role to say, hey, I'm talking to people in the market, this isn't going to excite them. We need to really reevaluate what this role will look like. But then also, I always, particularly when I have new team members joining my team, I tell them to attend the interviews and challenge. And I think, people do want that. Hiring managers do want that. They want to open up the conversation. They don't want all the responsibility to lay with them. They want your expertise to be able to say, hey, I actually disagree. I thought they presented this really well. I thought they presented that really well. I think they'll bring diversity to the team from a thought diversity perspective, or cultural diversity, or gender, or whatever it might be. Challenge. It's really important. And I believe our CEOs and our execs want that. They don't want us to be an operational machine behind the scenes and giving all the responsibility to you as the hiring manager. So I love that. That's wonderful. That's really great advice for everyone out there. But let's do now, we're going to do a stop, start, continue exercise. I'm going to go around the room. So what should we stop doing? What should we start doing? And what should we continue doing? Anthony, what's your perspective?
Look, stop sending long lists. It's rare, but I did have an external recruiter last week send me a list of about 20 candidates for a role. And it just takes both me and our chief people officer a lot of time to wade through a list of 20 people. I guess I'm probably expecting for that list to have been culled to 6, 7 and really get laser focused on the, on the top talent and the best fit. So that's probably an easy one. Start for me is providing a regular view of market insights. So I spoke previously about perhaps struggling a little bit with which KPIs and which metrics or market data would be most useful. For me, that would be an amazing thing to build up. And I'll actually go a little bit off piste here. And there was a comment asking for our views on bringing in graduates, or I think it's graduates. And I think that's a great question. For me personally, I would love to know, what does that look like for our organization? What do the stats tell us about how many graduates are being hired? What are other organizations doing? If you in TA and the recruitment space could help us form that strategy for how to tap up the best talent early on in their career, and then provide a pathway into our organization and a support mechanism for doing that. I mean, we've got a fairly small organization, only 200 people, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be out there looking for the best graduates coming into market and giving them an alternative to going to one of the bigger organizations. And in terms of continue, I think we've probably overused this, but I just can't stress the importance enough, is building great relationships and being a great business partner.
Yeah, 100%. Agree with all of that. And thank you so much for answering that grad question. And thank you for asking that question as well from the audience. Sarah, stop, start, continue. What should we stop doing? What should we start doing? What should we continue doing?
Trying to think of different things to Anthony, right? So stop relying on traditional sourcing methods. Come up with something that's a bit different. Capture my imagination. Tell me something I don't know. Don't replay back the short list that I've given you, because you would know more people than I would and be able to identify different candidates that I might not have thought of. Start, the building long-term relationships with people, leveraging that data and analytics. Again, that will tell us something a little bit different. It might identify something that chief execs aren't aware of. The continue piece, again, collaboration with hiring managers, absolutely. Effective communication, keep people informed. The continuous learning and adapting like everybody needs to in the new world going forward. I think it is an evolving industry. It's one where if we stay up to date on trends, then I think we've got greater opportunities from that.
Yeah, 100% agree with all. Wonderful advice. How about yourself, Mark? What should we stop doing, start doing, continue doing?
So for me, the stop and the start are very similar. I would plead with the stopping of generic data. Generic trends, generic analysis, that doesn't particularly impact my business or my ability to do my job. So I think that's the big one for me. And I think, similarly to the start is start telling me something new. Give me a bit of information, analysis, a trend, an insight that is somehow relevant, that I probably wouldn't have thought about. We've got a lot of people out there analysing, and don't get me wrong, analysing a lot of data. I just would love to hear something different. Or did you know that so-and-so is doing this? And so, whatever it might be. So I think that's a start for me, is providing those valuable insights. And for me to continue to challenge everything. That's a rule in our business across the board. And I think it's a good rule to take through, is challenge every decision in the right possible way, and challenge the thought behind those decisions. So I think the more people that can do that, I think it will be in a much better space.
Yeah, agreed. I want to ask a question. It's not one I've prepared you for. I do apologise, but it's I did receive a text message up on my phone there. They didn't pop it in the box. We've been impacted as an industry in the technology sector, where there's been a bit of a crash in terms of coming from the US. So a lot of organisations have downsized, or they've stopped hiring, and it's impacted talent acquisition professionals because they're not hiring. CEOs and execs figure, well, we're not hiring, we don't need recruiters in the team at the moment. Someone just reached out to me to say, what can they do to prove their worth in terms of other areas that they could bring benefit to an organisation, so that they can future-proof the talent acquisition function. So if that ever happens in their industry again, that they will be protected and providing other benefits to an organisation and focusing on other skills that they can bring. Do any of you have an opinion on that, or any advice on that? I thought it was quite a good question.
I'm not sure if it would answer the question explicitly, Ian, but for me, those blips and those downturns are only ever going to be short-lived. And the problem is, when we want to turn the tap back on, it's impossible to turn it on overnight. So again, it comes back to that point I was making earlier on again. If you know that there is going to be this downturn in the volume of work, how do you get organisations ready so that when they do want to proceed with ABC in the future, that they can get ahead of that a lot quicker, basically? Because the longer those roles stay vacant for, when you do turn the tap back on, that's when it costs the business, that time, that effort, that money. So for me, I think the only thing I can say to that is, how do you get both parties ready for when you need to turn the tap back on?
I think that's great advice, because my advice, and thank you so much for asking it, is to make sure that when you are really busy, that you are continuing to do talent pipelining, succession planning, effective talent management. Do that now. Don't wait for the downturn, because then organisations already know the worth that you can provide that. And when the tap comes back on, you're ready to go. I agree. Is Anthony, anything you'd add to that?
I think it's the talent management approach, both pipeline for the future, but also existing. So where you've got recent new hires, or candidates in the business who are relatively new to the organisation. Some of the effective things that I've seen that you did, Eden, was a really robust onboarding approach for new candidates. Now, I know that we're talking about, what if that dries up? But I think the best experience, or the best thing to do for a new candidate, is to provide them a brilliant onboarding experience. So that shows real value add from your TA partners. I think the other bit that I've got real value out of, and it probably blurs the lines a little bit with your HR business partner in some of the bigger organisations, but is about capability mapping for roles. So one of the things that we're seeing is, particularly amongst younger team members, is they're very ambitious and they want that promotion. They want to step up and take on more responsibility. But I think there needs to be a really clear vision outlined for what the actual capabilities and skill sets are required for that next role, and then articulating how that talent might get support when they're in the organisation to acquire those skills and to show those capabilities. So you're extending through the life cycle of team members coming into an organisation far beyond getting them into day one. You're really thinking about then, how do you set them up for success, to deliver, and then potentially to proceed to progress within the organisation. So that capability mapping with your HR business partner, really valuable.
I think that's awesome advice, because, and look, blur the lines, right? Everyone out there watching and listening, the line between a HR business partner and a talent acquisition professional should be blurred. You should be working together. You shouldn't be working in silos, and it does happen too often. And I've been in roles where it's been like that, that talent acquisition sat very separately, and you'd have an OD team or a business partnering team doing all the capability work, but you need to partner together. It's really important. Sarah, any advice from yourself?
Well, if I give you a real life example, then when COVID first hit, a lot of organisations weren't hiring people. They were just looking to manage with the people that they've got and not cause any impacts to them. But we knew that there was going to be a challenge of finding talent coming in. So our internal talent acquisition team started to look at doing a grad program, bringing people from outside industry. So we might have a specialism of transport. How do I find people from the transport industry, not insurance, but how you can bring those into the organization? And they pivoted a little around just thinking a bit differently as to how we can then bring talent into the organization and start to grow our own. So that was bringing people in. And then the second bit, which touching on what Anthony said, is that then how do you then develop your talent internally and look for those opportunities? Because people are looking for that career progression. They worked with the HR business partners to start to create those career pathways and start to really focus properly on talent and what that meant. And so then you knew when opportunities came up, promotions came up. In the last 2 years, I probably promoted more people internally as a result of that year of doing the hard graft to get us to this stage.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Just conscious of time now. We've hit our 45 minutes, so we'll go around. Just some final advice for the audience. Anthony, what would your final piece of advice be?
Oh, look, don't underestimate your value as a business partner. We spoke about it a lot in this session. You are so valuable to the organization in terms of bringing the best and most relevant talent in, and then supporting their onboarding journey through to becoming, really great. Every business is underpinned by the quality of its people, and that starts with you as a group. So never underestimate the value that you bring from a business partnering perspective.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Anthony. Sarah, final piece of advice for the audience.
Well, I'm going to finish off with one of the questions you started in the beginning about our own positive experience. So we can all relay that, all thinking about how we came into an organization. If these people on the call think about how they wanted to be treated, what was their positive experience, and then deliver that time and time again, they'll get people who want to work with them.
Love it. And yes, the audience out there, remember your CEO has been a candidate. They understand. They've been on the other side, so they know. Mark, how about yourself? Final piece of advice.
I would say, I've spent a lot of time with external recruiters over the last few years. So my advice for any external recruiter is be an ambassador for your client. Yes, you're an external party, but you're actually out there represents them. So know their business, talk about it, love it, sell it basically. So that's my advice: is be an ambassador for your client.
Wonderful. Well, Anthony, Sarah, and Mark, it's been such a privilege to have three CEOs come and talk to the community today. I really appreciate you taking the time out. And I think just taking the time out to do this shows that CEOs do care about talent acquisition. You do care about recruitment. So I just wanted to really, really thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aiden.
Thank you so much. I'll let you get back to your busy days, but yeah, take care and thanks again. And thanks to the audience. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.